At 15:20 on the 6th of April 1945, the battleship Yamato and the 2nd Destroyer Squadron departed Tokuyama under the classification of the Special Attack Force, which would comprise Operation Tengo, which would operate in tandem with Operation Floating Chrysanthemum. As the ship set sail, a message was sent from the Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet, Admiral Toyota, which was read to the crews. It stated, "The Imperial Navy is mounting a general offensive against the enemy at Okinawa by mustering in concert with the Army all of Japan's air, sea, and ground strength. The fate of our empire truly rests upon this one action. I have called for the organization of a surface special attack force for an assault operation of unrivaled bravery, so that the power of the Imperial Navy may be felt in this one action, in order that the brilliant tradition of the Imperial Navy surface forces may be exalted and our glory handed down to posterity. Each unit, regardless of whether or not it is a special attack force, will harden its resolve to fight gloriously to the death to completely destroy the enemy fleet, thereby establishing firmly an eternal foundation for the Empire." At 16:20, the Kure-supplied anti-submarine screening force separated from the Tengo force, and for the next 30 minutes, the destroyers and the cruiser Yahagi would use Yamato as a target ship and conduct gunnery practice. Due to the fuel shortages Japan was suffering from in 1945, steam was not diverted to the hydraulic systems that were necessary to operate the guns, and so, during this moment, while steam was up for the operation, it was seen as necessary for on-hand training to take place, and this had a positive effect on morale. By 1645, the Tengo force was operating at a speed of 20 knots, and a B-29 bomber sighted them in the Bungo Strait, but at that moment, their course of action was unclear. But the United States now had confirmation that the formation was mobile. At 1950, the formation had passed through the Bungo Strait largely uninterrupted, but at that moment, a reconnaissance aircraft had sighted a United States submarine 10 nautical miles from Harojima, and it subsequently attacked it. Another submarine was reported near Hyuga-Nada, and in order to avoid it, the Tengo force took a bearing of 140 degrees. Due to the reports of submarines coming in, Vice Admiral Ito ordered the 2nd Destroyer Squadron to take up the No. 1 cruising formation. This would put the destroyers Kasumi, Asashimo, Isakaze, Hamikaze, and Yukikaze 6 kilometers ahead of the Yamato. In order to supplement the impact of the No. 1 formation, it was also ordered that the vessels take on a zigzagging course to make torpedoing more difficult. As a result, U.S. submarines would not be able to lay up a torpedo strike on any of the Japanese ships, but they would continue to spot and harass the Japanese for the remainder of the night. At 2 a.m. on the 7th of April, the Japanese entered Osumi Channel and reduced speed to 16 knots. They were in a safe haven, but this would end at 6 a.m. as they had completed their passage of the channel, and Vice Admiral Ito ordered the vessels to take up the No. 3 cruising formation. During this time frame, information regarding Operation Floating Chrysanthemum would begin to reach Combined Fleet Headquarters, and the information would then be passed on to the Tengo force. Over the next several hours, it would be reported that 2 battleships, 3 cruisers, and 57 smaller vessels had been sunk, with 5 aircraft carriers being severely damaged. These reports were severely inflated. In reality, only 3 destroyers and 2 ammunition ships had been sunk, and 1 light aircraft carrier had received minor damage. At 6:57, the Asashimo had reported engine troubles and had to reduce speed to 12 knots, and after sailing on for several more hours, it would fall out of sight of the Tengo force and would be left behind. At 8:30 a.m., U.S. carrier-based aircraft began attacking South Kyushu, and this information was passed on to the Yamato, where it would then be evaluated. The enemy task force is composed of only 1 unit, and the position at 8:10 was reported as bearing about 175 degrees, distance 250 nautical miles to Yamato. The enemy task force approached early in the morning and carried out a small attack upon bases in South Kyushu. The enemy carrier-based aircraft discovered us, but turned away after shadowing for a short period of time. They were probably at the limit of their reconnaissance area, or evaded our fighters airborne for counterattack. There is still no report about the takeoff of our air groups for the attack of the enemy task force, but it is expected to come soon. Estimation: serious air attacks from the aforementioned task force should not be expected. The Japanese evaluation could not have been more wrong, as, going over to the United States side, Admirals Spruance and Pitcher, whom were in charge of dealing with the Tengo force, had a two-tier plan in dealing with the Yamato. It would primarily be composed of air attacks, but in the event that the air attacks failed to destroy the force, there would also be a formation of battleships and cruisers set up between the Tengo force and Okinawa. The United States expected the Japanese to take the shortest and quickest route. In reality, they opted to take the longest. Due to this unexpected course of the Tengo force, the battleships that the United States had set up were out of position, and they would have to rely solely on the carrier-based aircraft. The evaluation would not have to wait long to be shattered, as, about 1 hour later at 10 a.m., the Yamato would receive information that the Japanese had detected a large air group of U.S. carrier-based aircraft having taken off. It was quickly followed up by a second group, a third group, and a fourth group. Vice Admiral Ito would have undoubtedly known the danger his formation was in after receiving those reports. But, rather than retreating to the north, he stuck to his orders and attempted to close the distance to Okinawa even faster. This sealed the fate of the formation. At the same time, the air cover that the Tengo force had enjoyed throughout the morning had reached its operational limits and had to withdraw. It was now up to the anti-aircraft guns to defend the vessels. At 10:16, observers aboard the Yamato sighted 2 PBM flying boats bearing 230 degrees at a distance of 45 kilometers, and the Japanese started to hear transmissions from the United States aircraft, and they attempted to jam them. At 10:17, the 46-centimeter guns of the Yamato would fire the Type 3 anti-aircraft shell, but only fired one salvo and scared the flying boats off. From here on out, U.S. reconnaissance aircraft would remain outside the range of Yamato's weapons. At 11:07, a large formation of enemy aircraft appeared on Yamato's Type 13 air search radar, bearing 180 degrees. As a result, the Japanese ships picked up speed to 24 knots and took a course bearing 200 degrees, though this would change to 270 degrees at 11:18. At 11:30, the Type 13 radar would pick up 2 more formations of enemy aircraft bearing 180 degrees at a distance of 70 kilometers. From this point forward, the video will only focus on the attacks conducted against the Yamato. If you're interested in what happened to the Yahagi and the escorting destroyers, I have made 2 separate videos for those vessels, and I will link them down below. At 12:32, visual contact was made with approximately 150 U.S. carrier-based aircraft bearing 130 degrees, and at 12:34, Yamato's 46-centimeter main battery opened fire. 1 minute later, it was followed by the remainder of the anti-aircraft weapons. Vice Admiral Ito would send a message to Imperial headquarters outlining that the formation was under attack. At 12:41, independent evasive maneuvers and maximum battle speed was ordered. But Yamato would quickly be hit as 2 1,000-pound armor-piercing bombs would strike in the vicinity of the main mast. The No. 2 15.5-centimeter secondary gun was destroyed, the aftermost main battery rangefinder was destroyed, and the Type 13 air search radar shack had also been destroyed, disabling the radar. These bombs would start a fire in the vicinity of the after 15.5-centimeter magazine that would burn for the remainder of the battle. At 12:43, 2 torpedoes would strike the vessel on the port side at frames 125 and 150. This would cause a list of 5.5 degrees, which was reduced to 1 degree by counter-flooding. At 1300, the first air attack came to a conclusion, and Vice Admiral Ito sent a message to Imperial headquarters. The present damages of Yamato do not impair her fighting capabilities. Should the damages increase, a change of the assault attack time will be necessary. In order to confirm the condition of damaged ships, particularly that of the flagship of the 2nd Destroyer Squadron, Yahagi, we take course for them. Plans would have to quickly change, as 2 minutes later at 13:02, a second wave of approximately 50 aircraft was spotted bearing 200 degrees. The ship would be struck by 3 torpedoes on the port side at frames 124, 131, and 143, along with a single torpedo on the starboard side at frame 124. Due to the torpedo hits on the port side, the numbers 8 and 12 boiler rooms, the port outboard engine room, and the port hydraulic machinery room all flooded, causing a list of 16 degrees to port. The Japanese would counterflood utilizing 3,000 tons of salt water and filled up all of the starboard spaces and only managed to reduce the list to 5 degrees to port. As a result of the damage to the hull below the waterline and the subsequent flooding, drag on the hull was increased and speed was reduced to 18 knots. At 13:45, the second attack was coming to a conclusion and the third attack was about to begin. As a result of this close passover between the two attack waves, the Japanese lost track of how many aircraft were attacking them, and at that time, they did not realize a third attack was beginning, still considering it to be the end of the second attack. At the beginning of the third attack, Yamato was struck by 3 more torpedoes on the port side at frames 135, 154, and 164. It was also struck by a single torpedo on the starboard side at frame 150. This resulted in the auxiliary rudder being jammed at an unknown angle to the starboard side, but damage control would manually realign it to the center line of the ship. The 3 hits to the port side would result in boiler room number 10 flooding and a leak beginning in the starboard inboard turbine room. As a result, the list to port increased to 17 degrees, and it was ordered that the number 3 and 11 boiler rooms, along with the starboard hydraulic machinery room, be flooded in an attempt to counterflood and reduce the list. While the list to port did not reduce, it stopped increasing, but the ship's speed was now down to 12 knots. At 1400, the ship was attacked by dive bombers, and 3 bombs would strike the port side amidships, causing extensive damage to the anti-aircraft complement and killing much of the gunners. In another attempt to reduce the port list, it was ordered that the starboard outboard turbine room be flooded. After this had been completed, the ship's list had not reduced, and the ship was now down to the starboard inboard turbine. At 4:07, the ship was struck by 1 torpedo to starboard and 2 to port amidships at unknown positions. The port list would begin to increase once again and would reach 23 degrees. With the situation having rapidly deteriorated, Captain Arriga would attempt to withdraw to the north, but had found that the rudders were unresponsive and the ship was stuck in a slow turn to port. Electrical power had also been lost, so the cooling apparatuses for the main magazines had ceased, and due to the fire at the stern of the ship, the temperature in the after magazine was rising to a dangerous temperature. The magazines were ordered to be flooded, but the pumping station aft had been destroyed, and so this could not be carried out. At 14:02, Vice Admiral Ito officially ordered that the mission was cancelled, and Captain Arriga would order the crew to begin to prepare to abandon ship. During this time frame, attacks would continue on the ship, and a number of torpedoes were reported to have struck the port and starboard sides, worsening the situation aboard the vessel. At 14:20, abandoned ship was officially ordered. The port list of the ship would begin to rapidly increase, and at 14:23, when at approximately a 120-degree list, the primary magazines would explode and the Yamato would disappear beneath the surface. Vice Admiral Ito and Captain Arriga, along with 3,055 crew, were lost when the vessel sank. Only 277 men would survive. On the 31st of August 1945, Yamato was removed from the Imperial Navy's operational register. While the Japanese didn't realize it at the time, the United States would send a total of 386 aircraft to destroy the Yamato, and in return, only 10 of those aircraft were shot down. This was the epitome of a no-risk, high-reward engagement. Due to the fact that no more vessels of the Yamato class remained afloat and Japan's battleship force had been decimated, no extensive investigation into the flooding and damage of Yamato was conducted by the Japanese Navy, with only minor flooding schemes having been produced. This is partially why we are uncertain of the actual amount of hits the vessel had sustained, as a detailed investigation into the sinking of Yamato was not conducted until after the war had concluded by the United States Naval Technical Mission to Japan. This was also outlined by officers of the Tengo Force itself, including Rear Admiral Kimura from the 2nd Destroyer Squadron. He would state, "After the return to Sasebo, the Vice Chief of Staff of the Combined Fleet, Rear Admiral Yano Shikazo, visited me and asked me to be forgiven that Yahagi had not been fitted with radar. Other than this, there was no visit from the central organization, and I do not remember of an investigation about the operation." Following the failure of Operation Tengo, no other formation of Japanese warships would attempt to combat the United States Navy, as the Japanese simply didn't have warships to combat them. This was the engagement that concluded any potential threat the Japanese Navy could possess. With that having been said, I have nothing more I wish to add on to this topic for today. So, if you have learned something new in this video, why not leave a like and a comment down below, and have a wonderful day.